This is the presentation on plastic versus reusable bags by Michael Lichman, Jay Ellis, Alex Hill, Burke Peterson, and Kendall Rodriguez. Our viewpoint for this project was that of a state legislator analyzing the economic feasibility and environmental impact of banning plastic bags at all retail outlets to preserve the environment. For our observation, we went to the following locations in hopes of gathering observations on a wider consumer population as we hit big box stores, regular grocery stores, and the natural grocers. We chose to observe the following items, with our age item being an estimation, but we also wanted to see how many customers entered the store already having reusable bags, and how many of them chose reusable bags upon checkout, or a box, or nothing, depending on the number of items they might have, versus plastic, which is the most convenient one at any store. After we analyzed our observations, you can see here, as you might have predicted, that the Whole Foods and natural grocers had very little plastic bags being used, with natural grocers having none, but having the majority of their consumers choosing nothing. And Whole Foods had a large portion of reusable bags, while the other stores had overwhelming majority using plastic bags upon checkout. With our generation item, all generations that were observed had over 50% of the consumers using plastic bags, which isn't a surprise given the large convenience they are in any store. But baby boomers had the most reusable bags being used, with Gen X not far behind, and millennials very little, and Generation Z none, which is surprising as the younger generations seem to be the ones who are promoting more of the environmental impact of things. With our generation item, there was no large difference between males and females in their usage of plastic bags or another means to carry their groceries. There was, however, a very large difference by bag type and the time of day, with lunchtime having far more usage of reusable bags or box or something other than plastic versus the evening time, which might conclude maybe around lunchtime people are planning more of their shopping, and so they might think to bring those items, versus evening when someone might be going after work and might need to stop last minute and not have the time to get the reusable bags, or whatever the case may be. With our interview, we wanted to understand each interviewee's usage of plastic bags, whether or not they chose a plastic bag and why, and if they've ever used a reusable bag in their shopping experience. We also wanted to understand the interviewee's knowledge of the environmental impact of plastic bags, as a lot of people may or may not have been exposed to what actually happens with plastic bags. So we tried to understand what they've been exposed to, what have they learned, and if they'd actually be willing to learn more about the environmental impact of those bags. After gaining an understanding of their knowledge of the environmental impact, we asked them questions about their feelings toward a ban on plastic bags, whether or not they would support one, what might incentivize them for using reusable bags or disincentivize them from using plastic bags, and gaining their thoughts on what an effective message would be to help promote using reusable bags. As we analyzed our interview results, we noticed that 80% of our interviewees have used reusable bags in their shopping experience, but still choose plastic bags because of convenience. And 90% of our interviewees were actually already aware of the negative impact of bags, and 90% were also willing to receive more information about the environmental impact of plastic bags. Also, 80% of our interviewees said they would support a ban on plastic bags, and most of them said that a tax would work, but it would have to be a significant amount in order to affect their behavior. And we also had only one interviewee who said they did not support a ban or tax because she felt it would disproportionately affect poor people. After our interview results were analyzed, we decided to not focus on the word ban, which was used often in our interviews. But we instead wanted to focus on the incentives or disincentives for using or not using plastic bags. For example, an added tax, or they would get store credit or cash back if they used reusable bags. And we used that focus moving forward in our research project.
So for survey planning, we really wanted to just know what factors would ultimately influence the way consumers perceived eliminating plastic bags at grocery stores. With our survey, we wanted to provide as many different scenarios to respondents to fully understand what would deter them or encourage them to go plastic-free at grocery stores. And we wanted to look at the demographics to see how that would kind of affect the perspective of grocery shoppers as well. So, we distributed our survey on our social media networks, including Facebook statuses, tweeting it out on Twitter, forwarding the link on email, and texting it to our family and friends. The majority of respondents were geographically located in Utah, but the next biggest chunk of respondents came in from California. So it was interesting to see how that kind of shook up the answers and the demographics a bit, as California has already placed a tax on plastic bags at all of their grocery stores in the state. So we had a total of 129 respondents with a 90% completion rate, so 116 eligible respondents. It was interesting that the majority of our respondents were women, so perhaps it could be inferred that they just frequent and interact on social media more often than men, or that they are the primary shoppers for their household, so they felt like the survey and questions kind of directly impacted them. So the bulk of our respondents were Gen Y and millennials, which is the generation that has kind of made a turn in purchasing habits versus the previous generations. And this specific group is conscious about where they're putting their money and supporting brands whose core values and mission statements align with their own. So perhaps this also influenced how 80% of our respondents were in favor of going plastic free. So we didn't really think income would have a huge effect on the responses, as our questions framed around different price points for a plastic bag tax, and that was correct. So really it just came down to strictly convenience. We assumed that there would be a direct correlation to education level and the respondents' general awareness of how detrimental plastic bags are on our environment, but there was not. So it's evident that there is a need for clearer messaging about how exactly plastic bags are harming the environment and how they'll impact future generations as well. That could potentially influence people's perspectives on eliminating plastic bags. So the majority of our respondents claimed to be independent, which was very interesting as they were mostly all geographically located in Utah. But it's nice to see that political affiliation had little to no influence on the idea of eliminating plastic bags.
I'm going to go over the survey questions that worked, present the data on those questions, and attach any conclusions we were able to draw that were beneficial to our research objectives. Included in this review, I will be going over our experiment to discuss whether or not we thought it worked and what conclusion, if any, we were able to draw from it. As you can see, we had 129 people start the survey and 116 actually finish for a 90% completion rate. In our intro, we estimated it would take roughly 5 minutes to complete our survey, and the median time turned out to be roughly 7 minutes. Some of our questions took some reading and contemplation, and that is our best guess as to why it took a bit longer than estimated. We input our one and only survey complete filter question at the very beginning. The question was, how often do you go grocery shopping? And we jumped to the end of the survey for those who responded, never or only occasionally. As you can see, the vast majority of respondents, 96 to be exact, go grocery shopping once or twice a week. Here we asked where people most often shopped at. While this is still valuable data, it's not as valuable as it could have been if we scaled it in such a way so that we could gauge the distance between their choices. For instance, some people could have had a very close second or even 3 stores they frequent. As you can see, large supermarket chains are pretty popular. For this group of questions, we attempted to find some correlation between feelings about plastic bags and actual use. As you can see by our correlation matrix, we didn't have anything strong enough to pursue further, but a few items were headed there. Here we wanted to know how often people actually used reusable bags, plastic bags, or some combination thereof. While we were going through the developmental process with Professor Pavia, she pointed out that while some people may not use plastic bags at checkout, they may choose to use plastic on their produce for varying reasons. We adjusted our question to clarify that we were only talking about the non-produced items. We also used this question as a quasi-filter for 2 subsequent questions. Since we wanted to capture the motives of the extreme answers to this question, only those who answered that they always use only reusable or always use only plastic got to answer those 2 extra questions. You can see that a total of 67 of our respondents always use only plastic bags or use them most of the time, and only 37 respondents always used only reusable bags or use them most of the time. That means that 54% of people use plastic at least most of the time compared to roughly 30% that mostly use reusable. 30% seems like a higher number than anticipated and makes me wonder how our numbers compare to those of years past. As you could have probably guessed, the data shows that most people on the extreme end of the issue use only plastic bags because they are convenient, and those who only use reusable bags are doing so because of the environmental impact. Here we are trying to see if people change their behavior depending on which store they go to. The idea was that some stores have more social pressure than others. We could have made this data more valuable by adding a filter that asked those who said yes why they changed their behavior and gave them some choices. Our experiment was designed to see if different visual stimuli had an effect on people's willingness to support legislative intervention. The idea being that we could focus our messaging on what was most persuasive. We randomized the two pictures, the one with marine life implying that plastic bags directly affected marine life in the ocean, and the one of the landfill implying that plastic bags directly affect our own environment. There was a pretty decent uptick in support for legislative intervention when people were shown the turtle, 81.25% versus 75% for the landfill, suggesting that marine life evoked a greater feeling that government needed to step in. However, when we ran our stats and got a p-value of 0.405, we concluded that there is no evidence to support the difference is statistically significant. As you can see, although not proven significant in our experiment, the idea that marine life was important is further supported by this follow-up question we asked later on in the survey. Marine life is ranked number 1 by a pretty significant margin, and if you combine the numbers for both 1 and 2 for marine life and land animals, you will see that people by and large don't think that plastic affects them, but agree that it affects other life on our planet.
Our conjoint analysis focused on 3 elements we could use to encourage people to shop with reusable bags. One was a fee placed on plastic bag users. We tested 3 tiers: free for loyal customers, 10 cents a bag, or 50 cents a bag. The second element was a reward system for reusable bags, and the third tested the cost of reusable bags at 50 cents and $1. This graph shows the total part worths for each option. There was quite a bit of support for charging 10 cents and even 50 cents per plastic bag. The majority also supported a rewards program, and more respondents preferred cheaper reusable bags. Overall, we saw a lot of support for charging shoppers for plastic bags, offering rewards, and charging less for usable bags. Let's dive deeper into the politics of this legislature. Looking at the political affiliation helps us determine which groups will support our legislature and which groups will need a little more convincing. This graph shows that Republicans and independents prefer plastic bags to be free, while Democrats actually prefer stores to charge 10 cents per plastic bag. Democrats are also more in favor of a reward system than the other parties. And more Republicans prefer reusable bags to cost $1 than 50 cents. Next, we look at age. Most groups prefer 10 cents per bag over 50 cents, except the 56 to 65 crowd. Interestingly, we saw less support for a rewards program and a much higher preference for the dollar reusable bags in the 16 to 25 age bracket. Maybe there's not a lot of interest in reusable bags in the younger crowd. Next, we compared the conjoint responses to 2 other survey questions. Would you agree that plastic bags are harmful to the environment? And are you open to the idea of using reusable bags? The groups that strongly agreed to these questions preferred charging for plastic bags, while neutral respondents much prefer that plastic bags be free. This tells us that those on the fence about whether plastic bags are harmful would not like the idea of a plastic bag tax. Curiously, one respondent strongly disagreed with being open to reusable bags, but would prefer plastic bags to cost 50 cents. We saw a lot more support for the rewards program, but still, those neutral to the idea that plastic bags are bad for the environment would rather not have a rewards program. When looking at plastic bags costing 50 cents or $1, those that strongly agree that plastic bags are harmful preferred they cost 50 cents, while those that strongly disagree prefer them to cost $1. Strangely, more than 50% of those that are open to reusable bags would prefer them to cost $1. Maybe the 50 cents doesn't matter very much to them. Maybe they don't plan to actually buy reusable bags. Or possibly they want sturdier bags and are willing to pay more for them. Finally, we looked at our conjoint responses by location. This gives us an idea of where to campaign for a plastic bag ban and which areas respond better to certain incentives. Looking at northern Utah, we see that many people in the Salt Lake Metro are open to plastic bags costing 50 cents each. More data points would be useful, but Logan and Utah Valley prefer plastic bags to be free. When we look at reward programs, however, Utah Valley seems to respond better to that type of incentive.
Now I'd like to go over a couple of the questions that didn't work out too well. Question 1.4. Which best describes your level of preparation for grocery shopping? The wording we used for this question didn't quite portray our intent we were wanting to ask. We were trying to understand if prep time and planning before going grocery shopping correlated with higher usage in reusable bags. The question was worded to ask how much people prepared for grocery shopping, which was good because we wanted to see if more preparation and planning meant more use of reusable bags. The answers, however, were more related to how often or when people went grocery shopping. The answers didn't match the question, which didn't give us great data. Question 2.1. Which best reflects your level of education regarding the effects plastic bags have on the environment? We had similar issues with this question as well. The question was worded well, but our answers were a little vague. Without further description of what a little, or a moderate amount, or a lot was, we simply collected data on people's subjective ideas, which essentially gave us a generic bell curve with most people defaulting to the median. For some people, learning about it once or twice could be a great deal, where others could have attended a seminar on the subject and still only selected a moderate amount. More specific answers could have given us more accurate results. Throughout the survey, we discovered themes that show that the general population understands some of the impacts that plastic bags have on the environment. This understanding, however, doesn't outweigh the effort and/or cost of using reusable bags. Other efforts, such as charging for plastic bags to promote their use, will be required for change to occur. Most people using plastic bags understand the impact they have on the environment, but still use them out of convenience. Conducting the survey for a state legislator led us to see the public's willingness to support or oppose legislative action to charge extra for the use of plastic bags or ban them altogether. In general, people seem receptive to charging for plastic bags and or having a reward system in place for returning customers. From the conjoint analysis, Democrats seem more likely to support a charge of 10 cents for plastic bags and reusable bags that cost 50 cents instead of $1. The younger age bracket, however, is less likely to support a rewards program for using reusable bags. The information showed that those who were opinionated about the topic were more in favor for making changes, whereas those who were neutral about the topic opted in favor of plastic bags being free. This information, along with demographics and which region they were located throughout the state, would be very helpful to a state legislator and how they might campaign for a change in legislation. Overall, the survey performed very well, and we obtained some great data. There are those that are passionate about the environment, reusing, and recycling. These people, for the most part, already use reusable bags when grocery shopping. The rest of the people don't see the damage caused by using plastic bags to be greater than their convenience at the grocery store. Making a few changes to remind and help nudge people toward using reusable bags could go a long way. Thank you.